Welcome to Mean Brews. Today we're going to cover the not so popular style of India Brown Ale, also known as Brown IPA. It's BJCP Category 21 Specialty IPA, so let's get right into the recipe. The data I've received was only six recipes that have won awards, one of which was a best of show, 4 were golds and 1 was a silver. It's BJCP Category 21B. The description from BJCP is a hoppy, bitter, and moderately strong, like an American IPA, but with some caramel, chocolate, toffee, and or dark fruit malt character that is in an American brown ale. Now, when I looked over these recipes, I saw some significant evolving, particularly around the balance between the original gravity, malts, and the hops and the hop flavor, which puts it on the right of the slider. As far as the variation between recipes, not a lot of variation, just significant with the evolving nature of the style. The original gravities ranged between around 1.061 and 1.074. On the high side, the mean was 1.068, which was on the high side of the range for BJCP. IBUs, this was a pretty prominent average of 72.8, which is outside the range of BJCP. Most of the recipes kind of stuck within this realm right here, and we had one outlier of 100 IBUs. Pretty narrow band for the colors. Not a lot of them reported what color their beer was. However, we had an average of about 16.3. I would say you can go anywhere above that as well, up to 20, 21 even, and still be a brown IPA. A pretty broad range of colors for BJCP for this style. One of the evolutions that I'm seeing with the style is a change in the original gravities over time. Towards the beginning, around the early 2000s, the recipes had higher original gravities than they do today. However, the IBUs seem to be staying pretty steady, which is evidenced by this orange line on the graph right here. I think there's another way that they're getting balance, and I'll show that later, and it's about the proportion of crystal malts that people are putting into their beers and how that's increasing over time as well. With regards to the proportions of malts in the grain bills, there was an average of about 84% base malts, 8.1% crystal malts, 3.8% or about 4% roasted malt, 2 to 3% toast malts, and a little bit of a couple recipes had some adjuncts, and we'll talk about those later. For the base malts, 100% of the recipes use 2-row at an average of about 81% of the grist. It's pretty tight, narrow band there. The next highest base malt was Munich. 33% of the recipes used Munich malts at an average rate of about 6.6% of the grist, and one recipe used wheat malt and at about 5.7% of the grist. For the crystal malts and the sugar adjuncts, I lumped them together. Highest proportion of crystal malts was medium crystal, somewhere above 40 but below 80, like crystal 60. 64% of the recipes used a medium crystal malt at an average rate of about 4.6% of the grist. 33% of the recipes used light crystal at an average of 6.6% of the grist. And then there's a whole slew of one-off recipes that used either Special B, carapils, dark brown sugar, dextrose. Not significant enough to warrant adding those to a recipe. Here's what I was talking about earlier. This is the propensity for crystal malts as a percentage of the grain bill over time. You can see one of the earlier recipes in 1999 used about, 4.5% of the grist as crystal malts. And that's evolved over time to be significantly higher, double almost, for most of the recipes, as high as 11% of the grist. Take this into account with the original gravity declining over time. IBUs staying the same. I think they're getting their balance with those more sweeter crystal flavors, and you'll see this reflected in the recipe recommendation at the end. Bittering hops, again, all over the board. Doesn't really matter. Choose what you have. Higher alpha acid, probably better. Flavor hops, again, not real. 50% of the recipes used flavor hops. Not a real preference here between any of the recipes, so can't really make a recommendation here. Start to see when the late edition, really late edition hops come in, that Cascade kind of starts taking over in Centennial with 33% of the recipes and some others as well. 67% of the recipes used aroma hops. 83% of the recipes added Whirlpool hop additions. The most prominent was Cascade, followed by some others as you see here. Dry hops, 83. Again, only one didn't use dry hops. 83% of the recipes used dry hops. Centennial and Cascade were the most prominent, with almost a third of all the recipes using Centennial and Cascade, followed by some other New World varieties. So again, when I look at the flavor and aroma descriptors for the hops and weight them by the number of additions they had in all the recipes, the most prominent is the citrus note. 23% of the hop additions had a citrus character as their prominent descriptor, followed by floral with 21%, lemon, tropical, earth. These are the top 10 descriptors. So if you stay in that citrus, floral, lemon, grapefruit, I think you're really going to nail the style if you do that. Now the rates of the hop additions mirrored very closely to my last video, which was the rye IPA, with the exception that the Whirlpool hops were much more prominently used in this style. The highest one was dry hops. 83% used dry hops at an average rate of about half an ounce per gallon. So for a 5-gallon batch, that's right at 2.5 ounces. Whirlpool hops, 83%, again at 0.34 ounces per gallon. Aroma hops, 67% of the recipes used aroma hops at an average rate of about 1/4 ounce per gallon, almost half what the dry hops were. Flavor hops had a big range, but the average was right there at 0.31 ounces per gallon. Looking at the evolution over time, I'm showing here the bittering, aroma, Whirlpool, and dry hops, and the hop rates that have changed over time and linearizing them. Starting with the bittering hops, we start out at 0.1 ounces per gallon, and that almost doubles and triples in some cases to 0.35. You can see that black line right there. Shows how the hop rate for bittering hops has increased over time. Aroma hops, again pronounced. Some of these data points are underneath the others, so you can't really see them. But it's gone from 0.1 ounces per gallon back in 1999 to 0.3, so almost threefold increase in the rate of hop additions for aroma hops. Whirlpool, again, going from that 0.1 all the way up to 0.5 ounces per gallon, a big slope there, showing a big increase over time. And then dry hops, not a big of an increase because it started out pretty high, but again, you're seeing a significant difference between the dry hop additions in the earlier 2000s versus today. What yeast were used? Surprise, surprise. The Chico blend was, about half the recipes used the Chico blend, 43%. 14% used Nottingham, 14 Ringwood, and East Coast 10, 14% used that yeast as well. There's one recipe that didn't report, which is why the data is off here. Mash type, 100% used single infusion mashes, no step mashes for this style. And for the mash rest, 151 was the mean, with a range from 148 to 154. Pretty clear evidence of where you should be, regardless of the yeast you use. Fermentation temperature ranged between 64 and 68, and with a mean of 66.8 or 19C. Try to stick between these ranges and you'll do just fine with this recipe. Carbonation, right there at 2.5 was the average. I'm not going to show a plot of this. It was, all of them were pretty much nailed in that zone. So, my suggested recipe, So using the data that I have, I'm gonna use 78% pale 2-row American malt, around 8% Munich 1. I want that sweet toasty notes. Didn't include any toast malts in here, and I'm kind of getting that toastiness from the Munich and from the pale chocolate malts that I'm adding later on. Crystal 60 and Crystal 40, I put in 6% Crystal 60 and about 4% Crystal 40. That's right around 10%, which is on the high end, but it follows that curve that shows the newer recipes use more crystal malts than the older ones. And again, the pale chocolate malt from Crisp or Fawcett, either one, just to get that color at about 3.5%. I'm going to bitter with Centennial, the higher alpha acid than Cascade, at about 0.27 ounces per gallon. I'm going to do a flavor and aroma addition 15 and 5 minutes at about 0.3 ounces per gallon using Cascade. I'm following the later recipe guidelines as far as ounces per gallons here. And for the dry and whirlpool hops, each one will be at about 0.5 ounces per gallon. Just again, following that trend towards higher rates for recent styles. I'm going to shoot for an original gravity of 1.068 with about 66 IBUs. Not a lot of water chemistry. I didn't present on that. Only one recipe shared their water profile. But I really like the one that I presented in the rye IPA, and I'm going to try to shoot for this one as well. Again, the important number is the sulfate to chloride ratio of 3 to 1 to give you that sharp bitterness that you're looking for in this style. I'm going to do an infusion mash for 60 minutes at 151 Fahrenheit or 66 Celsius. I'm going to sparge and boil the wort for 60 minutes. These are all what were right on the averages. I'm going to chill to 65, oxygenate and pitch, and I'm going to ferment at 67 until it starts to slow down, raise it to 70, and let it sit there for probably a week or 2 weeks just to let it condition as it's needed. And then I'm going to keg and bottle to 2.5 volumes CO2. Well, this has been an interesting one. There wasn't a lot of variation in the style, and not a very exciting one. Not a lot of people brew these, as evidenced by the lack of competition data on the style. So I hope our next style that we pick is going to be one with a little bit more data so that I can have some more fun with it. So here we go. Let's see. Boom. Oh, American barley wine. Great. Well, thanks for sharing it. Thanks for coming to this again. I appreciate it. If you liked what you saw today, please subscribe. Check out our other videos. Please hit the notification icon so you get a notification when a new video comes out. And I'll see you in a week, and we'll cover American barley wine. Thanks. Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by the Master Homebrewer Program. Earn awards and badges based upon how you score in homebrewing competitions across the world. Sign up now at cialers.org.